Hi, class. So today is a lesson on literary devices and purpose. And there's a lot of good information here. It's somewhat could be repetitive for you if you know a lot of your literary devices. It might be stuff you know. So here again is the table of contents. A real good tool is to download that guided notes, right, and have this with you. And then as you navigate through, you take notes on what you need. I'm going to go over this lesson activity because this is the way that you can demonstrate your knowledge. Um, so let's look at this activity. This activity will help you meet this educational goal. You will analyze the use of literary devices to achieve specific purposes, right? So, authors play around with language, and we love this if we are music lovers. We like lyrics, then we really like the clever wordplay that people do when they write their lyrics. Um, and that's part of the enjoyment of literature. So the literary devices are the fun things that people do with words, the clever wordplay. And we're going to have you read the instructions for this self-checked activity. Type in your response to each question, and there's a self-check. So to begin, we read this poem by Robert Frost. I'll read it to you. Stopping by woods on a snowy evening. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, deep and dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. All right. So, what two literary devices, so I know I need to have two answers, appear in the last stanza? And if you've forgotten, the stanza is like the paragraph for poems. So this part right here. So we're looking for two literary devices that are in this section. Alliteration, euphemism, irony, oxymoron, repetition. Well, these two lines are the same, so they're repeating. So repetition is probably one of them. Now, do I remember what the rest of these are? It's trickier. If I do, then I'm definitely ready for this. If I don't, then I might need to go back and look at the common literary devices section of this lesson, right? Where in this section, you get a video, you get some background information, you get some practice, you get all three types of irony, which is just spectacular. I recently saw the most wonderful irony. It was a photograph of a man wearing a COVID response team jacket standing in between the two markers. When you're in the markets now and you have the markers that tell you how far 6 feet apart is, he was right up on this guy. He was standing in between them. So that was ironic, right? Because one of the ways that we say irony is when things are the opposite, right? So that would be dramatic irony, right? Or situational irony, where one thing is different than the other. So if you've forgotten some of this stuff, go back, do that lesson more intensely, and then come over here and make your answer choice in this box. And then move on, right? And you get another one. And this is the same poem, but now we want to talk about why the author uses repetition, right? I already told you one of the things was repetition. So is it to emphasize these lines in order to suggest that the speaker is not too tired to continue his journey, or used to make sure that each line in the last stanza rhymes, or calls for attention to the fact that the speaker is extremely tired but has a long way to go before reaching his destination, or gives the impression that the moment is not reality but a dream, right? You make your choice. When you press submit, you'll see what the answer is, so it's not like a secret. All right. And then finally, part C, and we notice this is the last thing I need to do in this lesson. I'm going to read this excerpt from The Disappearing Spoon. I'll read that to you in a moment. And then as I read, I'm going to remember to use these tips. I'm going to recall the definitions and uses of literary devices that I've learned in this lesson, right? So that's another good reason to have taken these notes, so that you've got all of the different literary devices written down here, all these different ones, paradox, idiom. I love paradoxes. Really change your life if you know paradoxes. But all this practice where you can learn these literary devices, that's what they're looking for here. So review all those definitions. Read and annotate the excerpt, identifying all the literary devices you find in it. Describe the meaning of the literary devices. Evaluate the details. Determine why the author used those. And then write a paragraph that identifies the literary devices in the excerpt. Explain why the author uses each one. And explain how they help the author achieve his purpose. So you have 3 things to do, right? What's the literary device you find? Why does the author use it? And how does it achieve his purpose? So you'll do your best to explain that. And let's read The Disappearing Spoon before I let you go. A little bit long. I'll read it out loud to you. From Precious to Productive. Excerpt from The Disappearing Spoon by Sam Keen. Ounce by ounce, the most valuable element among the elements you can actually buy is rhodium, element 45. That's why, to trump a mere platinum record, the Guinness Book of World Records gave former Beatle Paul McCartney a disc made of rhodium in 1979 to celebrate his becoming the best-selling musician of all time. But no one ever made more money more quickly with an element on the periodic table than the American chemist Charles Hall did with aluminum, element 13. Because of its shininess, aluminum was once classified as a precious metal like silver or platinum, element 78, worth hundreds of dollars an ounce. In the mid-1800s, a Frenchman figured out how to extract the metal for industry, making aluminum available commercially for a price. It was still more expensive than even gold. That's because, despite being the most common metal in the Earth's crust, around 8% of it by weight, hundreds of millions of times more common than gold, aluminum never appears in its pure form. It's always bonded to something else, usually oxygen. Pure samples were considered miracles. The French once displayed aluminum bars next to their crown jewels, and Emperor Napoleon III reserved a prized set of aluminum cutlery for special guests at banquets. Less favored guests used gold knives and forks. In the United States, government engineers, to show off the country's industrial achievements, capped the Washington Monument with 6-pound pyramids of aluminum in 1884. Aluminum's 60-year reign as the world's most precious metal was glorious, but soon an American chemist ruined everything. The metal's properties, light, strong, attractive, and the fact that there is so much of it in the Earth's crust had people pretty excited. But no one could figure out an easy way to separate it from oxygen. That was until a student at Oberlin College in Ohio named Charles Hall solved the problem. Hall worked on separating aluminum throughout his undergraduate years at Oberlin. He failed and failed and failed again, but failed a little more smartly each time. Finally, in 1886, Hall ran an electric current from handmade batteries — power lines didn't exist — through a liquid with dissolved aluminum compounds. The energy from the current separated the pure metal from the oxygen, which collected as tiny silver-colored nuggets on the bottom of the tank. The process was cheap and easy, and it would work just as well in huge vats as it had on the lab bench. This has been the most sought-after chemical prize for years, and Hall had found it. The aluminum boy wonder was just 23. Hall's fortune was not made instantly. Another chemist, Paul Héroult in France, stumbled on more or less the same process at the same time. Today, Hall and Héroult share credit for the discovery. An Austrian invented another separation method in 1887, and with the competition heating up, Hall quickly found that what became the Aluminum Company of America, or Alcoa, in Pittsburgh. It turned into one of the most successful business ventures in history. Aluminum production at Alcoa grew incredibly quickly. In the first months of 1888, Alcoa made 50 pounds of aluminum per day. 2 decades later, it produced 88,000 pounds per day to meet the demand. And while production went up, prices down dramatically. Years before Hall was born, one man's breakthrough had dropped aluminum from $550 per pound to $18 per pound in 7 years. 50 years later, Hall's company drove down the price to 25 cents per pound. At his death in 1914, Hall owned Alcoa shares worth $30 million, around $650 million today. And thanks to Hall, aluminum became the utterly super common metal we all know today. The basis for pop cans and pinging little lead bats and airplane bodies. I suppose it depends on your taste whether you think aluminum was better off as the world's most precious or most productive metal. Incidentally, throughout this book, I use the international spelling aluminum instead of the strictly American aluminum. This spelling disagreement traces its roots back to the early 1800s. The original spelling masks the IUM of the recently discovered barium, magnesium, sodium, and strontium, element 38. When Charles Hall applied for patents on his electric current process, he used the extra I too. However, when advertising his shiny metal, Hall was looser with his language. There's debate about whether cutting the I was intentional or simply a mistake in the advertisements, but when Hall saw aluminum, he thought it brilliant, since it aligned his product with the very classy platinum. His new metal caught on so quickly and grew so economically important that aluminum became the American spelling. As always in the United States, money talks. Small known fact, in England they say aluminium. My sister lives over there, so that's why I know that. All right. You will write your response to The Disappearing Spoon, right? Which we just read. Oh, that wasn't the right thing. Yes, it is. Okay, that's the right one. Oh, it's an excerpt called From Precious to Productive from The Disappearing Spoon. That makes sense. You'll write your response here, and then you'll self-evaluate. Again, this is the most important part. I want to know, do you think you're learning? Do you think you're getting something out of this? Share your work. Do the mastery test, and then I will check this unless your mastery test demonstrates 80% or better. Okay, take care. Let me know what you need from me and how I can be of support. We have a week and 3 days left.